is critical. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Senator Menendez. Senator Hagerty of Tennessee is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome, Director. I have three quick things to cover with you. First is looking at the recent brief outline that you've released on the FICRA rule. Some of the changes proposed strike me as particularly aggressive, and it's unclear how they can be justified as necessary or appropriate as the law requires. First, the outline uses a new term, data broker. That, as proposed, would significantly expand what constitutes a consumer report and consumer reporting agency, but it doesn't reference or explain the specific FICRA authority for this expansion. Second, the outline states that the CFPB is considering a proposal to, quote, clarify the extent to which credit header data constitutes a consumer report. And given the longstanding recognition by both Congress and the FTC that this data does not constitute a consumer report, they've always been treated separately in legislation, it's puzzling to me how such a drastic change of course is necessitated, particularly when you think about how that putting limits on credit header data would have serious impacts on community lenders' anti-fraud efforts, and it would seriously hamper law enforcement's ability. You may have seen the article in the Wall Street Journal yesterday from an FBI agent who used credit header data to block a terrorist attack. Can you explain to the committee specifically what statutory language gives the CFPB the authority to make these changes to the FICRA?
Sure. It's in the Fair Credit Reporting Act, and let me give you some more context. So data brokers, there's some of the same types of firms that Congress was concerned about when passing the Fair Credit Reporting Act, assembling very sensitive dossiers about each of us for sale. And I think it's not just for sale to commercial companies, but to even foreign agents. So we want to make sure that the business models that exist today, we are providing the appropriate clarity rather than just doing law enforcement investigations.
I want to make sure that there's clear regulatory authority too, and I want to make certain that you take into account these areas of concern.
We will, and I'm happy to discuss it with you, and we will share with you specifically, if we do propose a rule, the actual authority for which we would promulgate.
Let me turn to a different issue now, and this is deeply concerning to me in my home state. Prior to the release of the Basel Endgame proposal, which as a member of the FDIC you voted on, a letter was sent to the heads of the three regulators in charge of this proposal by a number of groups, including the NAACP. They were concerned about the impacts of this rule on credit availability, especially to less affluent Americans. In their letter, they say, and I'm going to quote this, quote, such a significant increase in capital standards will lead to reduced credit availability for all types of lending and undermine economic growth. If these standards are adopted, they'll have a devastating impact on our efforts to increase black ownership and disadvantage all first-time and, in particular, first-generation homebuyers who do not have the benefit of multi-generational wealth or higher-than-average incomes. Do you agree with these concerns, Director Chopra, and what would you intend to do about it?
Well, let me share with you long-term. One of the things that was so devastating to those underserved communities you mentioned was when there was a financial crisis because banks held inadequate capital. A financial crisis.
So you're talking about raising capital, making that capital unavailable. We've been through the financial crisis. We've been through re-regulating after the financial crisis. We've been through a stress test like we've never seen before with the pandemic. You're talking about taking capital away from this group.
What we're trying to do is avoid bailouts, avoid massive taxpayer
and
rescue.
at the same time depriving first-time owners, black American homeowners, my constituents
what we're
in Memphis,
doing is
Nashville, Chattanooga, Knoxville are not going to have the access.
We're collecting comment on that, the three bank regulatory agencies, and I can assure you I will personally look into that issue because there's nothing I would want to see. I want our financial system working to serve everybody fairly.
As do I, and this cuts against that very clearly in my mind. Last question for you, Director Chopra, and this is a grave concern to all of us in terms of the competence that's being demonstrated here or not being demonstrated, and the lack of confidence that the American public has in our agencies. In April, the CFPB notified Congress of a data breach. From within the CFPB, this data breach occurred where over 250,000 consumers' personal data was sent to a staffer's personal account. That presents a massive security risk, and it also really endangers the public's confidence in your agency. So I'd like to give you the opportunity to update us today on what has taken place there. Was that person compromised by any foreign authority? Was the data sold or transferred?
Great.
Can you give us assurances that that hasn't happened?
Yes, so the insider threat issue was extremely serious. That employee is no longer working at the CFPB. We've taken a whole host of steps to figure out how it should never recur. Consumers have been notified, but I can
Was the data
confirm that-
sold or transferred? Have you been able to get to the
Well,
bottom?
we're working with all appropriate law enforcement, but I have no evidence to suggest in any way that it was related to a foreign agent or intelligence operation. We have
You can see the threat I'm concerned
Oh,
about.
of course. I mean, I worry so much about insider threats because there is data across our ecosystem in online and others that can be misused and abused, and we take it very seriously.
I think you should. The confidence of the American public is critical here, and I think we continue to see it erode when we see mismanagement like
Well,
that.
thank you for raising that.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Senator Hagerty. Senator